Hey kids, Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. Now just check out this beauty, the Ducati Panigale V4s, an absolutely beautiful machine. It's been around now for about a year or so, loads of reviews done on it. We know it's a great sports bike, we know it's powerful, we know it's great on track. But the question I put to you is, could you live with this on a day-to-day basis if this was your only bike? Stick around and stay tuned for my in-depth review. I'll try and answer that question. So I've been lucky enough to be riding this beautiful bike, the Panigale V4s, for the last few weeks. It's been an absolute joy to ride and to have here in the man cave. I've ridden it in all sorts of conditions on all sorts of roads, and I've tried to learn as much as I possibly can about the bike to try and assess, if you only had one bike, whether this could be the one, whether you could use this on a day-to-day basis. So if you're interested in the V4 Panigale, you're going to want to stick around and stay tuned, because in this video I'm going to give you all the lessons I've learned, not just the good things but the bad things too, as well as give you a bit of an overview on the cost of ownership of the bike. So stick around and stay tuned if you're interested in the Panigale V4s. So how about the urban environment, riding the Panigale V4 in town? Well, I have to say, at slow speeds the Panigale is really well behaved these days. Ducati have made huge improvements on the way she handles over the old V-twin models. There's none of that chug that you get in the V-twins. This beautiful four-cylinder engine is lovely and smooth. With slow speed riding, not a problem. What is potentially a problem riding in town, I mean, this isn't a particularly busy town, this is just Aylesbury on a weekday lunchtime, so not an awful lot of traffic, but if you're in a really busy place at rush hour, this bike does get hot. I mean, even now I can feel that engine pumping out heat, which actually on a cold November day is very pleasant, but on a hot summer's day trying to get through London to work probably quickly become old. So not an ideal bike for the urban environment, I'd say. Certainly doable, but make sure you've got your asbestos lined underpants if you're going to be stuck in traffic for any length of time. Riding at night on the mighty V4s Panigale then. Well, if I'm completely honest, I've never ridden a Panigale at night before. I've not even ridden my own Panigale at night, so this is a first for me. It's got amazing lights on this actually. They're all LED all the way around. I've just got it on its dip beam at the moment. As ever, the GoPro just won't do it justice as to how good these lights are. But I've got a lovely spread of light out quite wide in front of me, and it's just as good as any car headlights I've ever used. The dip beam is beautiful. To put it onto full beam, you use the left hand like trigger finger and you push the flasher forward. There you go, that's full beam. And to be honest with you, other than just throwing the light a little bit further, not that much further, doesn't make much difference. So that's full beam and that's dip. Full beam, dip. Not an awful lot of difference, it has to be said. The other thing you notice about the Panigale when riding at night is, of course, this beautiful TFT screen goes into its night mode. So white on black instead of the other way around during the day. That's really nice, looks really cool. What the bike doesn't have though is switch gear that's lit up, which is a bit of a shame. So few motorcycle manufacturers do that as standard. Only KTM originally started doing it, and now Triumph is starting to follow suit, but looks like Ducati aren't there yet with that. And with a bike that's got so many complicated controls, particularly on the left hand handlebar, it would be useful if they were lit up so you could see, you know, the up and down toggle switches, etc., with the various modes and what have you. But a minor gripe, because these lights on here are absolutely beautiful. No problem at all riding at night on the big old V4. What a beautiful bike. Now, motorways, I would suggest, probably aren't the sorts of roads you're going to hunt out to ride on your Panigale V4s. But for the purposes of the test, I thought it important just to show what the bike is like on faster roads. So here I am on the M40, not a classic bikers riders road, as I say, but nonetheless good to wind the bike up a little bit. The great thing about going on a road like this though is you can at least get through the gears. Normally on normal roads I'm riding this, I'm barely getting out of third gear, but here I am at doing an indicated 73, and I'm actually in sixth gear, so it's quite nice to do that. But if you did have to do motorways, if you want to go on tour, say, on the bike, and you were going to take it on some long distance motorway transits, what's it like? Well, I have to say she's absolutely fine. As a sports bike, of course, it's got absolutely loads of power. I'm poodling along here on the inside lane. I'm still doing slightly more than the speed limit allowed on this road, but there's still cars overtaking me. But in terms of comfort, it's absolutely beautiful. I'm not being buffeted around. The screen on here looks to me to be a little bit more, well, a little bit higher than my 899 Panigale, and the frontal area is a little bit wider, I think, than the older bike. Because of the V4 engine, the whole bike's a little bit wider, and it seems to be doing a good job of keeping the bulk of the wind off me. So I'm feeling nice and protected, and no turbulent air, so no worries there. And as I've mentioned before, as sports bikes go, this is quite a comfortable bike. I mean, I'm crouched down a little bit to be out of the airflow, but you could ride like this for, you know, some time. I think I'd be quite happy giving it an hour or two on a motorway if I had to. Although, given the choice, let's take it on the twisters, of course. But yeah, faster roads, not an issue. Right, let's get out of here. So it's been raining best part of all night. It's stopped now, but the roads, as you can see, are very damp and slippery, and with the autumnal leaves on them as well, these roads are about as slippy as they get. So of course you're going to want to ride a bit carefully on any motorcycle in these sort of conditions. But what's the Panigale V4 like in the wet? Well, it is laden with electronics, as we know, so it's got things like very clever ABS and traction control, which is going to look out for you electronically. Of course, the bike has so much power, if you give it a big handful, well, I'm not going to give it a big handful to find out, but you've got to be careful. So even though those electronic aids are there, at some point physics will take over if you're stupid on the bike, but if you ride sensibly, then you should be fine. So the electronic aids are there to help you. Of course, it's got riding modes. I think this comes with street, race, and might be pro, can't remember what the other one is, I'll look it up. It doesn't actually have a wet mode as such, or a rain mode as such. Street is its softest mode, so I've got it in street mode, just to be sensible. Super careful on the white lines. And then the other thing about the bike that you've got to bear in mind is its tyres. It's got the Pirelli Super Corsas, which are fantastic tyres, really sticky, and I really love them. I've got them on my Street Triple. I really love those tyres, but I really love them in the dry. They've got a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a handful in the wet. I've had no issues on the Panigale with them. I've mainly ridden it in the dry, of course, and they've been absolutely fine. But in the wet conditions, I am kind of conscious that the Pirelli Super Corsas are known to bite, particularly if you're on a roundabout like this, hit a patch of diesel or something. Could be problematic. So all that namby-pambing around is basically saying, ride the thing carefully and you'll be fine, but do ride it carefully. It's got all the electronic gizmos to help you in terms of things, like I say, as ABS and traction control, but the tyres aren't particularly wet weather tyres, and you've got a very high horsepower machine. So in conditions like this, just take it easy and you should be fine.
So one of the great joys of owning a motorcycle, then what's the Panigale like to wash? Well, like any bike that's got big old fairings on, she's pretty good actually, just for the sort of weekly quick wash. Most of the crud is kept at bay underneath those fairings, but really enjoyed my short time looking after this bike, and once you give her a wash and dry, she looks absolutely beautiful. So yeah, one of the easier bikes to wash, I would say, so no worries there, you're going to enjoy looking after this one.
Okay, so it's all very well having the money to actually purchase a motorcycle like this. It is, of course, very expensive. Around about £24,000 one of these will cost you to buy. And if you've got that sort of money, you probably don't really care about what the cost of ownership is. But I did say I would give you how much it would cost to own and run one of these bikes. So I've done a bit of calculations, as ever, and come up with this bit of research. So it's quite interesting, this. So first off, road tax is over 600cc, so that's going to be £88 per year, no surprise there. Next, and this is the interesting one, insurance. I went to my friends at Principal Insurance and asked them for a quote on this very bike. Now they have my details available, so they can do a quote just based on my situation. So use this as indicative only. They look at my no claims bonus, they look at where I live, my points on my licence, that sort of thing, to come up with a quote. And in my case, they said if they were to insure me on the V4S, the best rate that they could get was £1,326 per year with a £750 excess. That is a huge figure as far as I'm concerned, much more expensive than any other bike I've done this analysis on. Perhaps not surprising given the sort of bike it is. One of the things that they did say is that often if you're a younger rider or you've got points on your licence, or depending on where you live, they may not even insure the bike at all. So I guess the message there is, if you're interested in one of these bikes, then do check out the insurance situation first, because you might find either you've got something very expensive on your hands, or you may not get insured at all. So do check that out. So that one was a bit of a surprise. And then servicing costs. I went to my local Ducati dealer, which is on your bike just up north of Aylesbury. Very helpful, the service department there. Had a chat to them, said how much would one of these cost me to keep on the road. They said the first service at 625 miles was £250-ish, so maybe a little bit more expensive than maybe a less thoroughbred bike, but nonetheless about normal. Then it's servicing every 7,500 miles. And they would charge for that about £330, so quite an expensive service. And then there's a big service with a valve check at 21,000 miles. Unfortunately, they couldn't tell me how much that would be because I haven't done one yet, but it's going to be more than £330. So add that lot together to come up with a sort of an annual cost of ownership figure, and that obviously excludes petrol and consumables like brake pads and tyres that you may well get through, and any depreciation. So just coming up with the cost to keep this in your garage per month, that's and I'm working on 2,000 miles a year. So tax 88, 1326 insurance, 330 for the servicing, comes to 1744 per annum, or £145.33 a month, just to have this in your garage. And that is by far and away the most expensive bike I've yet done this analysis on. Probably not surprising, probably not a factor if you can afford the bike, but it's interesting to note, isn't it? You're going to have to put 150 quid aside a month just to own the bike.
So what about fuel and fuel economy? Well, I guess if you can afford a V4S, fuel economy is the least of your concerns. And I haven't actually done a tot up to see how much I've actually pumped in versus mileage, but according to the bike computer, incredibly, I'm averaging 50.4 miles per gallon. Well, at the moment it says 52.9, that's the moving average, but the overall average of this bike, 50.9, I think. So if that's true, that's remarkable. What I can tell you though is I've done 130 miles before the fuel light came on, which is on now, so I'm going to go and get some fuel now. So range wise, seems pretty fine. It's pretty much the same as actually my Panigale. I think I do about 130 before the light comes on, so that's fine. I'll just take her up to the pumps and show you that there's no hassle with filling these things up. In fact, it's exactly the same setup. Surprise, surprise. That's my Panigale. Anyway, just need to find a fuel station now. Alrighty, let's see how much she'll take from fuel light being on, which was about 3 miles ago. Let's see how much we can actually pump in. Okay, so this fuel cap, very easy to operate, exactly the same as, in fact, my Panigale and my BMW. There we go, no hassle. Let's see what she'll take. Okay. Right, there we go. Definitely can't get any more fuel in there. And that was 12.25 litres, 16 quid from the fuel light being on. Alrighty, better go and pay. Okay, stand up. Excellent. Okay, unforgivably, no fuel gauge on the Panigale V4S that I can find anyway, and I have studied the manual quite extensively to see where it was lurking. So it's one of those bikes where you just have to go by the trip counter. I know lots of people say, you know, just go with the trip counter, it's no big deal. And I sort of agree, but actually, how hard is it to put a fuel gauge on a bike these days? I think there's no excuse really for not having one. I'd far rather have a fuel gauge than just the light. Anyway, minor point. But yeah, so no issues fueling up. The range seems, you know, reasonable for a sports bike, 130 miles and averaging around about 50 miles per gallon, which seems incredible. But then I haven't been thrashing the pants off the bike. I'm sure that would reduce hugely once you stick in a few track days.
Okay, so a couple of practical items that some people have asked me about the bike to demonstrate. One was, what's the horn like? So that's easy to show you. Okay, the horn is like this. Pretty loud, to be fair. And then the other question that I got asked was, what's the seating position like? So I'm 5'8", I've got a 32-inch inseam, or at least I wear a 32-inch leg in my jeans. And I find the seating position absolutely fine. I'm just in normal shoes here. Look, I'm virtually flat-footed on both sides of the bike. So, well, that's a little bit wider than the V-twin Panigales. It's not a tall bike whatsoever. It's perfectly nice to sit onto. So there we go, there's that. And then the other thing that somebody asked me was, what about pumping the tyres? Has it got the angled valve caps? So I'm pleased to say it does have the angled valve caps on this, so that's another plus point. Lubing the chain on it, bit of a pain because it doesn't have a centre stand, of course, as a sports bike, so you need to get yourself something like an ABBA stand or obviously paddock stand so you can lube the chain. But other than that, pretty practical bike to live with as far as day-to-day in the garage.
Okay, so something else that concerns me when I'm thinking about potentially purchasing a motorbike is what's the thing going to be like to lug around, to move it about on your driveway or in a car parking spot? That's not something I see on other people's reviews. So let's pop into Waitrose car park here. Let's face it, a Panigale V4s wouldn't be an Asda, would it? And let's just see what she's like to lug around off the side stand. Right, let's find a quiet-ish spot. What do we got? Let's do a sticker in here. Right, neutral, stand down. Here she is then, the beautiful Panigale V4s. So I'm in the middle of a standard parking spot here. Let's see what the turning circle's like if I try and just bring her around here. So she's a nice light bike, so it doesn't feel heavy to lift up at all. I'm on full lock. Round I go. And I'm certainly not going to make the first parking spot. In fact, there's a car in the way in the second one. But look, if I were to continue, I would actually, look at that, I'd be outside that spot. So I started there. It's taken a good 2 spots. So I'll call that a not particularly brilliant turning circle. But it is very light to pick up. So it's no issue lugging it around. But the turning circle is not brilliant. So could you take the Panigale V4 on tour then? Well, a simple answer to that is yes, you absolutely could. Of course you could take any bikes on tour, and some bikes are better than others. But normally I wouldn't say that a sports bike was one that you'd want to take on tour because they're uncomfortable, noisy and, you know, highly strung. But the V4 isn't really any of those things. It sounds lovely, it's comfortable. You could ride this for hours, and in fact I know that Michael Neves, my favourite MCN reporter, has had one of these bikes for the last year as his long-term bike, and he took it all across Spain and has toured extensive on his, so it's absolutely possible. Of course, you haven't got any luggage options on it, so you're going to have to carry a rucksack. But my goodness me, could you have a lot of fun on this bike if you took it down to Spain and went through the Picos or the Alps, wherever? Yes, 100%. Go touring on this bike, you'd have a great time.
So at the start of the video, I promised you I'd give you a rundown of the lessons I'd learned since I've been riding this bike. Not only the good stuff, but the negatives as well. So just to get the nasty stuff out of the way, let's do the negatives first. Some of the things I found out about the bike. Some of these are minor, some not so. You can decide yourself whether they're important to you or not. So first thing, the side stand. Extremely hard to get down, particularly at night when you can't see it. For some reason, the stand on this is tucked up slightly more than it is on my 899 Panigale, for example. On that one, I don't have so much of an issue, but on this one, every time I had to look quite hard at my foot to make sure I'd actually got the, you know, my toes around the side stand and positively get it down. You do not want to be dropping a bike at this value because you haven't got the stand down properly. So that's number one. Side stand, really hard to get down. It would be easy if they just put a little leg on it or something. Ducati could fix that, so maybe the next iteration. Next thing, and this was a bit of a bind, the mirrors. Absolutely appalling mirror vibration on this bike. I don't know why, they just are. These things are a bit stalky. They look lovely, but my goodness me, do they vibrate there. They vibrate almost to the point of being no good. They're some of the worst mirrors I've ever come across, and on a bike like this, that is no excuse whatsoever. Again, I personally own an 899 Panigale, so I'm a Panigale fan. It has mirrors that look the same, but on my Panigale, they actually fold in, so they are slightly different. These are fixed. On my Panigale, the mirrors are absolutely rock solid, so my recommendation to Ducati is go back to the mirrors that you used to have on the original Panigale. They work so much better, plus the fact they've got that folding in feature, which is really handy when you're moving the bike around, filtering, etc. So the mirrors, rubbish. Look good, not very functional. Next thing, and this is much bigger if you live in a hot country, not so much of a problem here, and that's heat from the engine. All Panigales suffer from this, but this thing absolutely pumps out amazing heat. At the moment, I'm recording this in the winter, it's a cold day. Riding this time of year in Blighty is fantastic because it keeps you nice and warm. But in the summer, it's not so funny, I would imagine. I know from my own, as I say, my 899 pumps out a fair bit of heat too. This one pumps out even more. If you live in a warm country, that's going to get to the point where you feel like you're absolutely cooking. So be warned about that. You can take some measures to cool it down. I'll stick a link at the end of the video to Panigale heat shields. I've installed one of those on my bike. They make them for all sorts of Panigales. If you've got a V4s, check them out. Link below as well. That's one way of getting some of the heat down so that you're slightly cooler. But that is a big issue, heat from the engine. Next thing. And this, again, inexcusable, I think, for a modern-day bike. No fuel gauge that I can find, anyway. It's a very complex bit of kit, this, as far as the TFT is concerned. I've been through all the options looking to try and activate a fuel gauge, or at least a range countdown. Doesn't seem to have either of those. I've even read the manual. That's how desperate I got. So a real pain, that. No fuel gauge on the bike. You just have to rely on a light coming on to let you know when you're low on fuel. I think this day and age, there's no excuse for that. Again, Ducati, please put a fuel gauge on the bike next time round. Next thing. Oh, starting the bike. It sounds like a bag of spanners when you go to start it. I'll give you a quick demo here. See what I mean? Now, again, I think all Ducatis might be like this. My 899 certainly sounds different, but it's similarly like a bag of spanners. I've ridden the Multistrada. That also sounded like it mainly didn't want to start. But this is also exactly the same as you heard. It just, it never has failed to start. It always starts, but it just sounds weird when you press that start button like it might not. So just a funny little thing, really, not really an issue. And then second from last, the sound of the bike. It is, of course, new, this engine, the V4. There was a lot of debate about whether it would sound like a Ducati. They've made great efforts, I think, to make the sound authentic like a Ducati, and it sounds nice. It does sound nice, but I have to say it doesn't sound as nice as my 899. Again, maybe I'm biased because, of course, I bought the 899 and I'm jealous because I haven't got one of these, but I think my 899 sounds better. My 899 is certainly louder, not that that's necessarily a good thing. This does have the standard pipes. I've got Termes on my 899, but with the 899, when you wind it up past 7,000 RPM, it goes from a growl to an absolute bark, and that's part of the fun of owning it. With this bike, everything's nice and smooth and linear. You wind it up and it doesn't suddenly make a different noise like mine does. So a little bit disappointed, actually, by the sound of the bike. If you've not listened to one before, then you'll find it's fine. It's got a nice, low, deep, throaty roar about it, but just not as nice as some of the other Panigales that came before it. And then last on my list of negatives for the bike, and no surprise here, that's just the cost of the machine. Not only to buy at 24 grand, but to run. It's an expensive old bike to purchase and to run. Okay, that was it for the negatives. To the positives I've found out about the bike then, I think possibly there's no surprises here, maybe one. Okay, so the first thing about the bike, I mean, just look at it. The thing absolutely looks beautiful to my mind. I've often said before, I think the Panigales, all of them, are the most beautiful bikes ever made, and this is no exception. I did wonder whether I liked the look of this one as much as the original Panigales, because it's a bit more angular at the front end, but I have to say, I've grown to really love this. Well, I didn't really have to grow. I loved it from the moment I saw it. I think it looks mean. I think it looks beautiful. It's an absolutely cracking looking bike. Obviously, a matter of personal choice, but I really, really love the looks of the bike. Next thing, having said that the sound wasn't as good as my 899 and previous twin V-twin Panigales, the V4 does sound nice. So actually the sound is a plus point on this. I was just comparing it to previous Panigalis when I put it in my negative list, but the sound is actually also a positive. It does sound nice when it's going. Next thing, and again, this will be no surprise to you, but the punch and acceleration out of this bike is absolutely mammoth. This thing is laden with electronics. Because of this review I'm trying to do as a day-to-day living with type review, looking at whether it's possible to live with this, you know, normally as a day-to-day bike. I've not done anything to do with its performance on track, things like that. There are plenty of other videos you can go and have a look at that at. But there's no doubt the punch and acceleration out of this bike, even on the road, is mammoth. All those electronics to help you keep the front wheel down, to help you not slide the back wheel too much, to help you, you know, with the ABS, the traction control, the 6-axis IMU that's got, all those things are there to help you. It makes the bike absolutely amazing. You can ride the thing with some gusto, even if you're not a very talented rider like myself, and it's brilliant. So the punch and acceleration, amazing. I've already mentioned the electronics package. I haven't touched on that much on the video. You can change every possible parameter and a few more you won't have thought of as well. Very detailed setup on the TFT, a beautiful TFT as well. The electronics package is the best I've seen. Next, suspension. It's got the Öhlins active suspension on this. It works beautifully. It runs like a magic carpet. I know that's people always say that, don't they, about bikes with good suspension, but it really is beautiful. I know how my 899 feels, and I thought that had good suspension. This is in another league. It's a beautiful, beautiful bike to ride. Linked with that, handling. Chucking it around corners as you'd expect. Beautiful. You think where you want to go, and it goes there. It becomes an extension of you. The handling on this bike is just beautiful. Next up, specialness factor. All Ducatis are special, aren't they? They're exotic bits of Italian kit. This thing, beautiful. Whenever you go out and ride on it, you feel special. You think you look cool whether you do or not. It's a wonderful, wonderful bike. It has a specialness factor about it. Difficult to explain, but when you have one of these in your garage, it's a beautiful thing and counts for a lot. So it's to do with pride of ownership, but this is a special bike. It makes you feel special. So that to me is the most important thing about any bike. Next thing, now this is the thing that I did find a little bit surprising. When I went and picked this bike up from Ducati UK, to be honest with you, I was a little bit frightened about it because I thought the thing was going to be intimidating to ride, and nothing could be further from the truth. This thing is a pussycat to ride. I've been lucky enough to ride lots of super bikes. This is, I think, the easiest sports bike I've ever ridden. There's nothing hard about this whatsoever. It doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel like it's going to bite your head off. You can ride it through town. It's not all jumpy and jerky. It is not like any other Ducati I've ever ridden. Quite frankly, it's the best Ducati I've ever ridden. It's just a brilliant, brilliant bike. And that's it really for the positives. I mean, as I said, there was no surprises there. I think to sum it up in the positives, I would just say everything about the bike. It's just a beautiful, beautiful bit of kit to ride, to look at, and I suspect if I was lucky enough to own as well. Beautiful bit of kit, love it. So at the start of this video, I posed the question, could you live with a Panigale V4s if it was your only bike day to day? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. The bike is so beautiful to ride. It's completely unintimidating, yet if you want it to be, it could be an absolute beast. I think it looks wonderful. It has an amazing quality about it that just makes you feel good when you ride it. As I said before, this is by a long margin the best Ducati I've ever ridden. I absolutely love this bike, and I'm going to be gutted when it goes back to Ducati in a few days' time. I've really enjoyed having it. Thanks to the guys at Ducati UK for letting me borrow the bike. I can fully see why MCN voted this Bike of the Year this year. It is a beautiful, beautiful bike. Am I going to get one? Sadly, I don't have the money to afford one, but if I did have the money, I would definitely have a Panigale V4s here in the man cave. It's a beautiful, beautiful bike. If you get the chance to ride one, do so. Alrighty, that's it. That's my in-depth review of the Panigale V4s. As I say, sadly, it's got to go back to Ducati. I'm going to miss it. I'm going to have to get used to riding my 899 again, which isn't a bad bike, let's face it. But yeah, what an amazing bike. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that video, and I look forward to speaking to you again next time. Until then, this has been the Mr. and Fly. Cheerio.